वो लाइव हाँ शुरू हो जाओ।
पोस्ट कौन करने वाला था दो? Okay, so एक second. I don't have the presentation open.
Just tell me when we go live, Raghav. I'll introduce.
It's go live. Go live. Go live.
We're live.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another bootcamp here at GDSC. Today, the topic is we're going to discuss about podcasts. It seems like a pretty fun topic, and I feel so it would be better explained by Varanium and Sunidhi, who are the mentors here at GDSC for the podcast. And even in GDSC, we have a couple of podcasts going on. So if you want, you can anyways join in and listen to them online. So yeah, over to you guys.
Hi guys, एक second. Let me just share my screen. दिखा है?
Yes, sir.
Screen
दिख रहा है.
Nice. So let's just start with what are podcasts and we don't mind Hindi or English. जिसमें भी reply करना है कर लेना, because मैं chat नहीं पढ़ रहा हूँ and I'm way too lazy to open it. ठीक है? Let's be honest here. So what are podcasts and what comes to your mind when you hear it? Like कोई भी बता दो, कुछ भी अगर आता है.
Podcast is like a talk session where one main person or two main people, they invite others and they talk about just random stuff, or it can be centric, it can be focused on one thing. For example, some people only talk about the media or sports, and some people just pick up random topics.
But what if you're a loner?
You can do it. You can do it yourself.
हाँ. And Sunidhi, what comes to your mind?
I just got a message that Sunidhi का crash हुआ एक और.
So, okay. No word. चलो कोई बात नहीं, मैं कर लेता हूँ. तो basically जैसे आदित्य ने बोला था, that is correct and like not exactly correct. Podcast का the definition can be varying and it's very subjective. Jesse, for me, podcast is a way to express yourself and whatever is on your mind, and it's not necessary to invite anyone. Like मन कर रहा है अकेले record कर लिया, and usually that looks थोड़ा weird and seems weird to listen, but sometimes just for self-wo it feels good. And when you invite someone over to talk, then mostly it's a common topic which is decided between you guys or जो trending है, because usually social influencers वही करते हैं जो trending होता है. Can't think about anything new. Sad. And और क्या, और तो कुछ नहीं. Then let's just move on. Then different types of podcasts सुनिधि है कि वो समझा देगी, because वो better समझा सकती है. By the way, तुम्हें कुछ ideas है of different types of podcasts? कोई भी? आयुष, आदित्य, राघव, कोई बता दो.
Interview based podcast कर सकते हो.
Interview based how?
Like किसी बंदे से interview ले रहे हो ना तुम, understanding their life, तो तुम podcast में बदल सकते हो.
अच्छा हाँ. और कोई?
Maybe like a fiction or non-fiction, I guess.
That works too.
Yeah.
And
Storytelling podcasts are pretty common as well.
And maybe the combination of the both, like fiction and non-fiction.
Those are fun to listen to. And
Yeah, exactly.
most of the time it's यही कि people are discussing stories ही, जैसे आदित्य आयुष ने बोला था. Then how to find an idea? So usually what happens is you sit down and you can't just come up with an idea. It's when we made our first podcast for the series straight out of DSC, we all had a common problem, which was imposter syndrome. And that was the idea which came to us back then. And we displayed it and we talked about it and we were like, oh, this is the idea, we'll just record it. No one can just be like, okay, podcast के लिए क्या idea ले? It's always something that's going on around you. अगर तुम बैठोगे कि अच्छा ये इस चीज पे बात कर सकते हैं, but it's not happening around you, then pretty sure the podcast will be a flop show in like 10 or 20 minutes, because you don't know what's happening, you haven't experienced it. क्या ही बोलोगे M2 के बारे में कि M2 है, स्क्रीन है, मिडनाइट ब्लू है, और क्या है, whatever it is. ठीक है, Apple है, sad है, just in case. We are Google, use Android, okay, and also no Windows bad. Thank you, Ayush. फिर
I have contradictory opinions, but okay.
Even
Please
I
go
have
on.
contradictory opinions.
कोई बात नहीं तुम लोग
Windows
अभी
is
कुछ बोल-
decent enough to get the work done.
दब्बा हो Windows तो मतलब it should be removed from the face of the earth.
no I
Not
mean
to
Apple
mind
and
the
Windows
language, not to mind the language of the session, but fuck off.
हाँ I hope no one minds then let's move on to recording your idea and also मैं ना बहुत जल्दी खत्म कर रहा हूँ because सुनिधि नहीं है once she comes in she'll explain the different types of podcasts and the management so for recording your idea just get a silent room get a good mic and तुम्हारा काम हो जाना चाहिए hopefully me Raghav Sunidhi and there was this one guy Suprit we all know क्या struggle होता है बिना mic के to record a podcast या फिर online record करना is
बस
also
एक
tough
माइक तो था तब एक माइक
हाँ
तो
एक mic
सुनिधि लेके
था
आई थी
Yeah, we felt the struggle, bro.
you guys felt the struggle because editing करने में problem आती है ना
Yeah, exactly.
ये बंदा करता है ना
हाँ मैं और आदित्य को पता है भाई कितनी दिक्कत हो सकती है एक की वॉल्यूम कम आ रही है दूसरे की बढ़ानी पड़ रही है एंड यूजुअली यही आइडिया है कि मल्टीपल पीपल मल्टीपल माइक्स एंड दो भी रख लो काफी है बट ऐसे माइक्स होने चाहिए विच डू नॉट रिकॉर्ड द अदर ऑडियो लाइक सेंसिटिविटी ऐसे अरेंज होनी चाहिए उनकी या तो फिर तुम दो अलग कमरे में बैठो एंड हेडफोन लगा के बैठ जाओ ग्रोइंग एंड मैनेजिंग कुछ सुनीति का वेट करना पड़ेगा and let's just talk about our struggles that we faced during our podcast so Raghav I usually था ना हाँ जितने भी थे for the first one like when we were planning it out we can just talk about it because I remember when we did the first meet postponed like 2 or 3 times वो भी एक हफ्ते के गैप पे कि नेक्स्ट वीक करते एंड देन क्या हुआ था एग्जाम्स या कुछ हो गए थे ना राघव
क्या क्या
जब हम पहला स्ट्रेट आउट ऑफ
Mood नहीं
डीएससी
किया
वाला
था भाई किसी का.
Evals थे ना, I guess.
हाँ
Evals.
एवाल्स चलने
Lab
लग गए
evals
थे
थे.
भाई बहुत
हाँ,
दिक्कत हुई थी करने में रिकॉर्ड
तब तब आई डोंट नो हमने जब ये आइडिया निकाला था वो माय फ्रेंड इम्पोस्टर का आई थिंक सुनिधि या तुम में से किसी ने बोला था ना कि इम्पोस्टर सिंड्रोम पे करते हैं
हाँ
मैंने
मैंने
बोला
कहा
था बट
तूने अबे तुम ही लोग थे यार कुछ किसी ने इंग्लिश में बात की
भाई
मुझे इतना याद है
मैं रॉक सा साइब्रो भेज दूंगा मैं फिर से.
हाँ ठीक है सर आपने दी थी आइडिया बट एनीवे समवन
हाँ
गॉट दैट आइडिया एंड देन पहले तो मैं तो वो इंसान था तो मुझे तो पता ही नहीं इम्पोस्टर सिंड्रोम होता क्या
अरे मतलब हो ही इतने चैट यार आपको
राघव
imposter
भाई
syndrome
mental
feel ही
health-
नहीं होता
भाई राघव और मेंटल हेल्थ fuck off.
कुछ नहीं होता भाई राघव मेंटल हेल्थ इज
हो क्यों
नथिंग
गया है भाई.
राघव
फिर-
ओनली टिंकर्स
फिर जब समझा तो तब फिर यू देन स्टार्ट रिलेटिंग टू द प्रॉब्लम राइट एंड फिर अपनी भी खुंदक थी कुछ
डीएससी की
बीएससी कॉलेज कैसा चल रहा है इंजीनियरिंग का पैशन वो सब
अच्छा
एंड द
गाइस
वियर्ड थिंग इज व्हाट आई रियलाइज किसी भी टॉपिक में तुम वो इंजीनियरिंग के प्रॉब्लम्स को तुम लिंक कर सकते हो किसी तरह से चाहे
हाँ
इम्पोस्टर सिंड्रोम हो कुछ भी हो
अच्छा गाइस जस्ट इन केस अगर तुम्हें किसी पे डीएससी के बारे में डीएसए के बारे में शिट करना है ना उस पॉडकास्ट को सुन लेना बहुत बहुत ज्यादा शिट किया राघव ने लाइक he has insulted DSA like there's no tomorrow and trust me बहुत अच्छी चीज थी वो and एक second I'll just stop sharing
मेरा एक्चुअली रूममेट को मैंने सुनाया था पॉडकास्ट तो उसने ना अगले दिन उसने सुबह सुना था उसने फिर शाम को मुझे बोला अरे तुमने इम्पोस्टर सिंड्रोम के में बात की तो थी 15-20 मिनट उसके
15-20
आगे के
मिनट।
सारे मिनट उसके आगे के सारे तो तुमने डीएसए को
हाँ।
डिस करके चले गए थे
अरे 15-20 भी नहीं थे 10 मिनट imposter syndrome the rest is just us completely insulting DSA and those who do DSA just for the sole purpose of interviews and we were like नहीं अगर कोई DSA पसंद करता है हम उसे पसंद ही नहीं कर सकते and अब देख लो 100 days of DSA कर रहे हैं हम and
Hypocrisy की भी एक लिमिट होती है, but okay.
हाँ वही तो hypocrisy की लिमिट हमने एकदम क्रॉस कर दिया
डीएसए प्रोग्राम शुरू करा उसके बाद हमने
डीएससी में डीएससी का प्रोग्राम
एंड उसमें तू तो सबसे ज्यादा इन्वॉल्व है मैं भी इन्वॉल्व होने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ
हम दोनों इन्वॉल्व और
सबने
क्या
कैमरा ऑफ क्यों कर दिया
पता नहीं
भाई मैं लेट गया हूँ, YouTube लाइव पे जा रहा है ये।
मैं भी आराम से सुन रही हूँ, मजा आ रहा है।
अच्छा रुको फिर मैं कैमरा
आदित्य
यार मैं
पाठक गुड।
लेटो
सही
मत
है।
प्लीज,
तो वही
अभी मत
आई
लेटो।
थिंक जो मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है पॉडकास्ट में, नेवर एक्चुअली रिकॉर्डेड अ पॉडकास्ट एवर।
हाँ,
ये
दैट वाज मेरा भी फर्स्ट।
हाँ, आई थिंक सुनीति अभी तक आई नहीं क्या? वो
नहीं
आ रही
सुनी
है?
थी अब तक। आ रही है? टू लेट
हाँ वो
नाउ।
आ रही है। उसका प्रॉब्लम चल रहा है अभी।
कोई बात
बट
नहीं।
सुनीति को एक्सपीरियंस था पॉडकास्ट का। बट
हाँ
आई थिंक व्हाट एक्चुअली मुझे याद है जब मैंने ज्वाइन किया था ना पॉडकास्ट के अंदर, लाइक आई थॉट कि ये जैसे स्टेट ऑफ डीएससी शुरू भी करते हैं, लाइक द एंड्रेस क्यों किया सर?
आयुष।
Guys, let's do this कि बाकियों को भी like participants को भी
हैंड
included
रेज
करवा दो.
थप्पड़ मारने के लिए किया है।
Participants को भी included फिर
I
करा
हाँ
जाए.
हाँ, अरे
I
हाँ, तुम लोग भी
feel
बोल सकते हो।
Like तुम लोग
I
भी अपनी
feel
कोई
less
favorite podcast
representation
बता
of
दो अगर
तो
तुम सुनते हो तो. Like
I
and why
feel
you
less
like it.
representation of OUs and friends in the podcast.
अच्छा,
सिर्फ
OU
सुनिधि
से
के पास एक्सपीरियंस थोड़ी है।
अच्छा हाँ, अरे
अरे
हाँ, ये भी तो पॉडकास्टर है, ओयूस एंड
आयुष भी
फ्रेंड्स।
तो
यस
पॉडकास्टर है गाइस, सुनो। There's
यस
like
यस
this
हाँ,
OUs and friends on Spotify, ठीक है, तुम लोग सुन।
स्पॉटिफाई पे है।
इट इज अ
उसका
वेरी,
लिंक डालना चैट पे, उसका लिंक डाल चैट पे।
हाँ, प्रमोट OUs and friends।
तो हुआ ये था, व्हाट आई
Hello, you
रियलाइज्ड
all are
वाज,
back.
ओ आ गई।
फाइनली इट इज अबाउट टाइम।
Wow.
तो
Hi.
दोबारा लैपटॉप पे आई है ना?
हाँ
ये क्रैश होगा, ये क्रैश होगा
सुनिधि,
पक्का।
नहीं, अब
हाँ।
मैं ठीक करके आई हूँ।
Third time's the charm.
भाई हो गया क्रैश, वीडियो पॉज हो गई
आया.
थी।
Fuck.
Shit.
ओ हाय वंशिका।
ओ हाय वंशिका, क्या हाल?
नहीं, अब आ गई वापस।
ओ हाय।
Yeah,
अच्छा,
उससे पहले कि हो तू
वंशिका।
खत्म कर दे अपना पार्ट.
सुन सुन सुन, डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ पॉडकास्ट एक्सप्लेन कर दे एंड मैनेजमेंट का, बाकी मैंने कर दिया।
Oh, like so, like there are different types of podcasts, like conversational podcasts. There's like an interview podcast. There's a storytelling podcast, and like various types of podcasts, right? So
क्रैश।
Hello.
सुनिधि,
हेलो सुनिधि।
well, let's
सुनिधि
just
हेलो।
let's
So
just take it
guys,
to
basically
time.
third time's not the charm.
Third is
ये तो
never
बहुत
the
बुरा
charm.
हाल है भाई, सुनिधि को तो डर लग रहा होगा ये क्या चल
फिर आ
रहा
गई.
है।
फिर आ गए।
आ
ओ
गई? अच्छा, ये
सुनिधि
दूसरी
too.
जगह से आई।
back again.
हेलो
Hey,
हाय
Hello, I
सुनिधि।
came back.
हिंदी सुनिधि, आपका
Okay.
लैपटॉप
कैमरा मत
दोबारा
ऑन
क्रैश हो
करो,
गया?
कोई सीन नहीं है। लाइक अगर नेट का इशू आ रहा है काफी।
हाँ हाँ, उसका नेट का इशू।
तेरा नहीं ऑन है डूड।
उसका
नहीं आ
नेट
रहा,
नहीं, उसका
but like
कंप्यूटर का इशू है।
अब मैंने अब फोन से ज्वाइन कर लिया, so it's fine.
Okay, different types of podcasts. Let's continue.
Yeah, so I mean, there are different types of podcasts, right? Like, we have interview podcasts, we have like conversational podcasts, we have storytelling podcasts, right? So basically, what happens in an interview podcast is that you basically get a guest, right? And you have a conversation with them. You talk to them about what their journey is, or what work they do, how did they get there, advice, basic stuff, right? And then we come to the conversational podcast. A very good example for conversational podcast is our DSC podcast, right? Where we talked about imposter syndrome, right? Where we just came together and we took a topic, we talked about imposter syndrome, and we just had a conversation regarding it, right? We touched up various points, and that's pretty much it. And then we have the storytelling podcast. So, like, if Spotify, per you guys must have heard ads, of like some horror story or something, right? So there a person comes and they basically tell a story about like a horror story, or like, let's say, something about politics, right? So they basically describe a particular incident and they make it into a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can you
I thought
believe
crash हो गया वापस. So sorry.
Well,
That's it for different types of podcasts.
yeah, I mean, that. What do you guys think? Like, what are the various types of podcasts? As this is like discussion, or like you guys also can add on.
Oh well.
We have discussed there are, like you said, conversation and interview based, fiction, non-fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just move on to growing and managing.
Right. So again, growing and managing a podcast, right? How do So there are various ways of growing the podcast, right? First things first, like you've put your first episode out, you've done all the initializing process. Now you want, more people to listen, you want your audience to grow, right? So what do you do now? You first, like, you have to, like, tip number one, you have to be consistent. You have to, like, put work every day. You have to put out episodes regularly, so that more people start listening to it, and it just grows, because the algo works that way. The second thing what I can say is that know your audience, right? Know what your like the audience, the feedback the audience gives you, you should take that into account, and you should sort of move forward with that. Also, like, the audience can give you feedback in a way that, like, there are various episodes. Some episodes work, some episodes don't work, right? So you can also, like, find out that way which topic you should, like, have a podcast on, right? Again, like, you can ask your guests to share. You can ask your friends to share. What do you guys think are, like, the different ways? Varu?
Sorry. So मेरे हिसाब से growing would be just most of the time it's like marketing and like uploading it on social media and stuff for the growing part, and also maybe like you said inviting a guest. But to be honest, the guest idea, according to me, it's like not that woe. It's a good way to grow, but I feel like it's like asking for help to grow instead of having a guest who's like at a bigger position. Let's just actually get someone who's in the field, like you get it, thoda sa. There's
Yeah, or even, like, put out podcasts on various channels, right? Like, somebody uses Spotify, somebody uses Apple Podcasts, somebody prefers YouTube, right? So
Mhm.
you can, like, put it on various platforms so that you get more views and more reach.
Yeah. And most of the time, what you can do is just like call in your friends and like just for your mental peace. And probably your mental peace could be someone else's mental peace as well.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think another way would probably also be collaborations. So you get, like, other people who are on the podcast, so that their audience will start listening to your podcast, your audience will start listening to their podcast, and, like, you know your views only will grow.
Mhm.
Even the kind of topics we talk about can be diversified, through which we are able to sort of touch different fields. Like we can talk about art, right? And still mix technology in it, but then you're actually getting the art community also wanting to listen to the podcast. So that is actually one other way we can grow.
Yeah, like interdisciplinary, right?
That's right. That is one thing. I think like straight out of GDSC, the podcast we made, right? The main intention was, like, we saw these WhatsApp groups, informal WhatsApp groups of GDSC. We had this famous cup shop group on WhatsApp, and the interesting thing was people talked about various things, from politics to actual technology, to trying out some very crazy things um, in their homes. So, like, the thing was, how about we capitalize on those discussions and actually just sort of have a, like, ये discussions हम professionally करें, ताकि लोगों को environment दिखे कि मतलब कैसा तुम्हारा वो चल रहा है ना, club.
Right.
In fact, I think these sort of discussions, podcasts ke through, they also show the people outside of the club
Yeah.
the kind of environment we are in and the kind of vibe we have going around.
It just brings a transparency in between us.
Correct. That's right.
One of they just think we are a bunch of nerds, which we are.
Right.
Let's be honest.
Which we rightfully are.
Rightfully and pridefully.
Yeah.
I think another way to, like, grow your podcast can also be to, like, interact with the audience, right? So let's say if you have, like, an Instagram page about your podcast, so you should keep on regularly posting on your Instagram page, so that the audience knows that you are alive, you're not dead, and so they kind of stay loyal to your podcast, and they're loyal listeners.
Yeah, that reminds me. There's this one podcast, Boss Barista podcast. Okay, so it's a podcast about coffee, of course. Of course.
I would
So
listen to it.
they actually post regularly, like Sunidhi said, and it's like not just about their lives. It's almost always about the topic they're about to talk about, but they don't specify it. So it's like a pattern that's going on. They start posting about this, then the next podcast that comes out is a guest with this the person related to that field about which they were talking about in their stories. It's like a pattern. So I guess that's one way of like giving putting down some spoilers or like teasers to just keep up the excitement or hype for the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, moving on to this, like, what are some of your favorite podcasts and like, what are some of the podcasts you listen to? Like, I
Boss
mean, everyone
Barista.
can speak.
Boss Barista. Let's go.
I think some popular podcasts I have listened to is one is the Van Show by Linus Tech Tips. It's a great podcast. Like it's I think an hour and a half worth of content, but it's purely tech. And actually now they have actually started diversifying. Have realized like um, I think a lot of you might have looked at Linus Tech Tips. If you have not, please look at that
You
YouTube
listening
channel.
to that podcast was very expected.
Yeah.
No, but actually, like the
नहीं
thing
हम
about
nerds नहीं है हम nerds.
नहीं, but उस podcast में the beauty was that what I started realizing in the like few episodes that have come out before, right, is where Linus Sebastian, who's actually the founder of that company, he's actually kind of showing how he's going about building the next, in this case, अभी currently lab बना रहा है वो एक. So again, like as Varu said, right, transparency create करता है वो. So like when you listen to those podcasts, you sort of feel that yes, you know what's going on in the Linus Media Group
You're interacting with
company.
them.
Is
Correct,
someone
correct.
here like has someone here like is into like crime podcasts because they are pretty much fun. So if you want some suggestions, there's a podcast called Serial and The Clearing. These both are very nice
Also, the
crime
Desi Crime
podcasts.
podcast. I love the
Oh
Desi Crime.
yeah, the Indian one, right?
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
what's a
It's
crime
it's very
podcast?
nice.
Again,
Desi, which one?
Desi
Crime podcasts are like they make you feel very involved. The best part about those podcasts, and I think so why they work so well, is because they make you feel too involved. Because
Yeah.
you are on the hinge to like figure out what is happening and who did
Oh,
whatever.
acha,
So,
figuring it out. I thought
the
like committing it.
storytelling form of the podcast.
yeah.
I thought committing the whole thing.
Pagal hai kya? Bhai, sorry.
Let's
Actually,
go.
Kai Kawasaki
If you're-
का भी हाँ बता.
Yeah, I'll just drop some my personal recommendations, whatever, and why they work so well. Okay, if you're into comedy, like Indian scene, if you're into comedy, then there's this podcast called No New Notifications. It's by Kanan Gill and Manik. Okay? It's pretty neat. And why? Yeah, if you've heard of it, if you know, you know, because like according to my whatever, it works very well because again, interaction, like audience interaction, बहुत होता है. And the best thing about anything, like rather anything, we as humans tend to gather around in communities to not feel left around, right? So all these podcasts or like any community in general just make you feel very involved, and that's why I think so they work. So same with like No New Notifications and Simple Ken, if you've heard about it, it's pretty good. Also agar
I
internet,
love Simple Ken. It's my favorite.
yeah, Simple Ken is it's just very comfy and it makes you feel very personal about it, and that's why it works again.
Oh, that reminds me. There's
Also,
one.
the internet said so.
That is an absolute, yeah. Earlier episodes uske bahut pyare hai. It's very nice.
There's this
If you
one.
go, just
Bol,
let
bol,
me finish. There's just
Sorry.
two left, and then So internationally, if you want to make a podcast, like be heard. So if you've heard about the Joe Rogan Experience or
Guy Raj NPR podcast. I love listening to all the NPR
हाँ
podcasts.
वो अच्छा है NPR.
And also like Tim Ferriss. I love Tim Ferriss.
Actually, Impulsive is also good. Actually, yeah.
Impulsive
I've
is
heard, I have actually मैंने उनकी initial episodes सुने थे. They were decent. उसके बाद I think I stopped listening after some time.
No, yeah, the way that Impulsive makes people involved is just because like very great as celebrities. Like Liam Payne udhar aaya tha to just And then he did some fucking controversy, and that's
Yeah.
it's great.
I think Logan Paul's works and like Impulsive Vagera, What's Good podcast, they all work because they are like celebrities, but they can also relate to people. So they find ways to talk about their experiences, which are like much better than what most people get. But they talk about it in a way that it makes people feel like they live it with them.
Yeah, exactly. Why like user involvement or like the listeners involvement is exactly just and you have to figure out how to get there. That's what makes your podcast like special or unique in sort of a way, in my opinion. Yeah, it's pretty decent.
I think
Also,
usme,
just like the last one, like a feature, whatever. There's a very nice podcast called The Trash Taste. If you're into anime or just like Japanese culture in general, I would recommend you to like listen. It's
I
pretty
moved
nice.
towards the keyboard and then I went to
Same.
Keyword?
मैं तो चला गया anime की वजह से.
Oh shit, sorry. Yeah.
I think the thing
Also,
that, like,
guys,
as
I'm
you,
gonna shamelessly plug in my podcast. Go listen to What's Ahead.
I've given the link in the chat.
Thanks, Raghav.
I think the one thing about, like, as you were talking about, like impulsive, even the van show, like they work because I think since, like Aditya said, right, that they have these great experiences and we somehow get, like, we relate to them even though we have not experienced them ever. I think the key skill for a podcaster in those sort of scenarios is that they're good storytellers, right? I think the skill of telling a story in a way where the audience actually feels that they're in the story, right, is, I think, one of the
I think
most
there is an
important
art
things to
to
make it
storytelling.
engaging.
There's an art to storytelling, and
That's
you
right.
have to sort of, master that skill or learn that skill. And I feel like that sort of goes a long way, not just for podcasts, for anything in life in general.
That's right. That's right. I think, yeah, that's a very interesting thing that you have to look into. I think that's how we went ahead and said, like, actually, yeah, in DSC's case, like, we had already the Raw Talent podcast, and I think I remember Saurabh here was saying, like, get someone from outside and get an interview done with them, right? Yeah, there was time पे. तो
and
then I
तब
think
हम
Varoo, मैं और Suprit थे, and then we thought, like, why are we, and Ayush भी था.
हाँ,
We
why
thought,
are
like,
we looking for someone
why are
else?
we waiting? Why are we waiting for someone?
Let's just make
Let's-
our podcast and then
Correct.
show it to them. Here's what we did. Do you
करा
want
तो
to?
तुझे, मैंने आयुष बोला तो
अभी तो
तूने
आयुष
कैमरा ऑन
देखो
किया
नहीं
तो-
करते हैं.
अरे वो टाइप पहले कर लिया था यार, sorry.
But we like,
and I think वरुण ने एक पॉइंट पहले बोला था ना प्रेजेंटेशन में कि like when you're inviting someone, and I think Sunidhi has more experience in that, when you invite someone, usually it's you have some obligation involved in it, right? Like, you're coming to my podcast, spending your time. But like the reason why we thought कि discussions plan out करते हैं ताकि लोगों को वो जो बाहर का बंदा बोले हाँ आना चाहिए इस podcast में कि लोग interesting बातें करते हैं and listeners भी इनके फिर बढ़ जाएंगे. So that's when, like, we thought, like, I mean, even though we will start out with pretty bad episodes and will probably not be in the right schedule, like बहुत time लगेगा एक podcast निकालने में, but धीरे-धीरे जैसे-जैसे वो हम समझ जाएंगे process of, posting these podcasts,
we'll get regular.
and उससे फिर then the listeners hopefully will also increase.
You get in that flow.
That's right.
Yeah. Also,
and I think उसके लिए
just if
start
you-
करना पड़ेगा.
yeah, exactly where I was getting to. So just like a वैसे random सा exercise or whatever, जिन लोगों ने भी अभी तक नहीं बोला है, like in the meet, like Dipanshi, Aman, Arman, Shaurya, Vanshika, could you guys just drop in any topic and we can all just start discussing about it. Just
That's
say
right.
anything that comes up in your mind, and that would lead to a what's it called, like a
Discussion.
discussion. Yeah, exactly.
Nerd.
भाई यार, if anyone, भाई क्यों मैं नहीं हूँ nerd. You are nerd.
अरे कोई भी टॉपिक के बारे में बात करो, खाने के बारे में बात करो, वो भी कर लेंगे.
Yeah. Any one topic. Let's talk about Patiala as a city.
Patiala as a city.
Patiala as a city.
Bro, it just starts and then it ends.
Not
I
true.
know,
Then you haven't been to like Patiala. It's very sad
हाँ
when people say that
Okay,
Patiala just
bro.
starts and ends. For
I
real.
have been out there. It's
भाई
भाई मेरा
मैंने पूरा
पर्सनल
पटियाला
एक्सपीरियंस
पैर पे
पटियाला में
घुमा
आई
है
थिंक ये है कि आई हैव नॉट traveled much in Patiala.
है ना वही दिक्कत है
वही. So I think I
Yeah.
cannot say much.
I guess
ये
I've
मैं
traveled through
I mean,
scooter,
Ravi
but
doesn't get
I
out of the
guess
house
that's it.
anyway.
yeah वो मेरा है
Nah,
case. I
that's
don't get out much.
nerd.
I traveled एक बार with a friend, आधे घंटे में वापस आ गया, कहता पटियाला हो गया तेरा। मैंने बोला what?
Told you.
इतना तो
I think Ayush has some experiences.
हाँ, Ayush has some good experience about that.
Can we end the live? Then I'll share my experiences,
हाँ
please.
हाँ,
Yeah, sure,
okay,
sure, sure,
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
bye
guys.
YouTube. Zoom में
Bye
आ जाना.
YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
That's with my time.
Done.
So
YouTube.